In this presentation, we're going to just do a very brief introduction to the geography, environment, climate of ancient Macedonia. And in general, there it is in red in the middle, and that's after its conquest of neighboring sort of tribes that were, again, this whole region is tribal, but these were close enough with an affinity that they could be absorbed into the Macedonian Empire during the late 5th and 4th centuries AD, excuse me, BC. And then we should point out its neighbors, also kind of tribal peoples. We've got Albania, ancient Epirus to the west. To the north would be Illyria and Dardania, and then over to the east you have Thrace, which is self-divided into sort of four tribal entities, recognizing sort of four different royal houses in that way. Macedonia itself, we can characterize it as two parts. There was lowland Macedonia, where the Aegeid Temenid dynasty ruled, and this is more of the plain surrounded by mountains. And then you go up into the mountains through the great rivers into the hinterland highlands, the uplands, and that's known as Upper Macedonia. And up there were Macedonian barons who ruled up there. And one of the big issues in antiquity was, could the king in the lowlands control the barons up in the highlands? And so lowland and upland highland are one of the ways to kind of characterize ancient Macedonia. This is worked out today in the division between Greece and the modern state of Macedonia, which is essentially ancient upland Macedonia. They still speak a language that's descended from Macedonian as opposed to Greek. Now, all these peoples in this region, the Thracians, the Illyrians, the Epirus, they spoke Indo-European languages of the same root as Greek, but what we're told is that Macedonians and Greeks could not understand each other without translating, without learning each other's languages in that way. And generally what we can see, just looking at it, look at where Athens is way to the south, for example. So this is the North Aegean. It is still a Mediterranean environment. It is still characterized by mostly sunshine, the summer drought, 100 days of cloudless skies during the summer, rainy seasons in the winter. But when we move to the northern part of the Aegean, you're getting closer to continental climate, and so it can be generally cooler, especially in the winter. You can get rain even on the shore in Thessaloniki, for example, in Macedonia. And other things we could say, as a combined unit of lowland and upland Macedonia, it is surrounded by mountains. It is a very compact region surrounded by mountains, accessible only through a couple of passes or by sea. So if you can control those passes and have a strong navy, Macedonia was immensely defensible. And we characterize, this is Google Earth now, so it's not as, it shows the vegetation, but it's not as clear with the elevation, for example. I've got Mount Olympus right there, and that's almost 10,000 feet straight up from sea level, for example. It's characterized really by kind of two features, right? You've got the Balkan Massif, mountain chains descending right to the sea. And then the effect of erosion over time, the watersheds and the rivers that sort of cut their way, allowing the rainfall and the snowfall to make their way down to baseline, or in this case, the Aegean. And so Macedonia is kind of characterized by its three interior rivers and its river to the south, the Peneus, which divides Macedonia from neighboring Thessaly. So swinging that way, counterclockwise, we go from the Peneus, and this is famous for its Vale of Tempe, up to the Haliakmon, which kind of curves around Mount Olympus back in there. And then the Great River, the Axios, also today known as the Vardar, which is the one that goes all the way up into Highland Macedonia. And then to the furthest to the east, the Strymon, which really goes in a separate direction, kind of around the mountains that surround the Vardar Basin, shall we say. So Axios is the main river, and that's the main plain that empties into the sea right there. And then you've got the Strymon to the east and the Haliakmon to the west. Just another relief map, just kind of pointing out the same thing. You get a sense of elevation from this. The Vale of Tempe was famous particularly during the Persian Wars. So what we're told is that the first attempt of the Hellenic League to stop the Persian invasion of Xerxes was to seize this very, very narrow river basin and to use, again, the narrowness of the available land, terrain to spread an army out to counteract the numerical superiority of the Persians. And originally they were kind of blocking the Persians right there. The whole Persian army was backed up into Macedonia. And what we're told is that the Macedonian king at the time, Alexander I, he had a problem. He had maybe 200,000 Persians living off the land of Macedonia, eating his country out of food supplies. He had Medi's, earlier the Macedonians had Medi's. But what we're told is that he actually secretly went to the Greek camp and warned the Greeks that there was a way around their position. Basically, so much as hinting, if you don't get out of here, I'm going to show the Persians the way around the position. And so they withdrew and then later took up their position in Thermopylae with the same objective to kind of separate and limit the numerical advantage of the Persian forces. And you can see how this works. There's just only so many ways through the Vale of Tempe. On the sea, there were many Greek city-states. Greek colonies. We need to always remember this, and this is going to be a process that Philip engages in basically taking these cities and taking their lands and giving them away to his own troops. So Pydna comes to mind, Olynthos, Amphipolis, think of the town that Aristotle came from. Here is an example of one of these cities on the coast. Now, this is a later Hellenistic foundation, Thessaloniki, modern-day Saloniki, and you can see the 3rd century fortifications of Septimius Severus surrounding the town. Kind of remarkable because these walls are almost completely intact, and it gives you a real sense of how big the town was at its peak. At the top, the bastion is still used, was 30 years ago as a prison when I last visited this place. To the right, you have the remains of the agora with the vaulting constructed by Septimius Severus. The walls are slightly later than him, in fact. I was there in, I want to say March. It's still kind of dreary and snowy at that time. And here is the widest extent. The sea is in the background of the Axios River, and this is where Pella was situated. So Aigai was the original capital of the Macedonian line. Archelaus I, who was king during the Peloponnesian War, is the one who relocated it to Pella and Hellenized it. He was heavily influenced. He was educated in Greek, heavily influenced by Greek offshore influences. This is the era of the Delian League and the Athenian Empire. That Macedonia was incredibly valuable to the Athenians for its timber, for shipping and shipbuilding, and tar and pitch shipbuilding supplies, as well as forest and timber is the main thing, but also fish and minerals such as gold and silver, mining in the mountains nearby. And here are the excavated remains of Pella. And I should point out, we'll get a chance later, Pella, the monumentality of this court had a tremendous influence later on in Greek interior decoration, which seems to be a deliberate imitation of some of the marble revetment, marble dressed walls and interiors that line these beautiful palaces. Okay, so now we're going to move from lowland Macedonia, that very narrow basin right there in the heart of that gulf you see right there. And we're going to go up the Vardar River up into upland Macedonia. And here is Demir Kapıcı, which means the Iron Gate. And we're confronted by this ravine. So what we have is this mountainous plateau which has gradually been eroded, and it creates these sort of basins, plains, but it had to cut its way down to sea level. And so what it did was cut its way through the limestone, through this ravine. All three of the great rivers have these ravines that kind of separate the upland from the lowland. And they have their own kind of climate as well, kind of mix between the upland climate and the Mediterranean climate. But just this kind of want to leave you with this starkness of these narrow gorges that you would have to go to get up into the uplands. And here is a relief map, a nice relief map of Upper Macedonia, modern day Macedonia, but Upper Macedonia. And you can see how about 50% of the landmass there is mountains. The plain is only about 30%, and the arable land is only about 20-25%. But you do have this very lush plain in the middle of the mountains. What was the climate like? Cold in the winter. Snow was likely. Up in the mountains, almost half the year is sub-freezing temperatures, for example. But down in the valley, and at the valley down there, let's say Skopje, we're only at 245 meters, so not quite 1,000 feet. And so what we know is that the winters were kind of wet and cold. Summers are hot and dry. It's kind of cut off from continental winds that by these mountains, and so it just basically gets the Mediterranean heat in the summertime. Pleasant falls, very short springs. It goes from winter to summer very rapidly as things, the snow melts and things dry up in that regard. Just some examples of this sort of upland plains. We're dealing with plains, not quite meadows yet, but plains. Here is Bitola in Macedonia. Another area, Kochani in Macedonia. I should point out, population today, very small. Skopje, the capital and the major city, has about 500,000 people. After that, there's a town, Kuzmanovo, which drops down to about 100,000. And after that, it's just in the 20s and the 30s. This is small populations because how do you sustain yourself? So arable land is limited, fruit and nut trees, vineyards, beekeeping, kind of a highland pursuit anywhere in the Mediterranean, but mainly, again, timber, forestry resources, mining, and most of all, animal husbandry. So the main thing I want to leave you with is a sense that probably the nobles, the barons, controlled the rich, fertile lands of the river basin itself, and everybody else has to kind of exist in a kind of a marginal format as herders, and we'll talk about that as we proceed. Some key factors I got a text here, to the dynastic weakness of the Argead dynasty in the lowland include the division of Upper and Lower Macedonia into separate, really, entities, climate zones. Upper Macedonia was essentially dominated by the barons, Lower Macedonia by the king. There was a tendency of Macedonian nobles to invite in the kings of neighboring tribal regions if they were at odds with the king in the lowland. And he's got to get his army up there, so that's another problem right there. So there was this constant dispute and relationships. There's going to be a lot of intermarriages between these barons and the royal dynasty to kind of keep the peace. But that leads to further intrigue. And we like to say the life expectancy of the Macedonian king was short, on average, very short. So here is a Roman settlement, Heraclea in Lancestris. The Lancestrians were one of the really dominant noble houses up in the highlands. So there's the Roman view remains to the left, and then above you get one of these kind of classic medieval fortresses, early modern fortresses of the Ottoman Empire and their subject kings throughout this Balkan Massif. These big, massive, kind of dark, somber fortresses that overlook these villages throughout the Balkans. It's kind of a standard there. Lakes, Great Lakes, Lake, for example, this is some, I forget what it was, 300 feet deep. So these big, deep lakes. Again, you're looking at the terrain here. Not much you could do for a living. Today, it's tourism is the main thing, for example. Again, I'm trying to make you think about accessibility, inaccessibility. And as we move up the Vardar River, we get to the mountains that enclose it. So the tallest mountain in Macedonia, Mount Korab at 9,400 feet, for example. So you can see these watersheds. We're at the top of the world here. We're at the Balkan Massif, and where it traps rain and snow and gradually empties out into the Aegean. In this area, we get about 1,000 millimeters, so a meter of rain a year, whereas in Athens, it's somewhere around 400 millimeters. So, what is it? 40 centimeters a year. Here is another one of the great mountains at the end of the Vardar, the Mount Sar, about 9,000 feet. And we're getting into very, very much alpine terrain at this point. I'm going to speak momentarily about transhuman herding. So that's maybe the main pursuit of the inhabitants of this upland region. So what you have are herders who can exploit the marginal terrain, the non-arable terrain, while the nobles kind of control the arable terrain in this way. So in this way, we like to say this is a way of projecting or expanding the land use dependent on agriculture to begin with. They could not do what they do without access to tools and agriculture. But they can go up into the mountains and they can exploit the wasteland, what we would call the wasteland, land that you can't farm on because of the climate and because of the thinness of the soil and what have you. So here we see herders herding, animal husbandry, a major component of the economic activity even today on the Balkans. When I've hiked around up in here, it's amazing how the herders are just out there all day, just kind of their herds are just kind of almost rotating around each other. And we'll talk about that in a second. And so here we are at the top of the world when we think, okay, this is pretty desolate, it's great for hiking and it's scenic beauty. But the reality is that what we're looking at here are top lawn meadows. This is a kind of grass, an alpine grass, that grows in the summertime. And it can provide 4 to 5 times the nutrient of any of the food intake that goats and sheep are going to get anywhere else in their trek. Now it's going to be enclosed in the wintertime by snow. So what we have with herding is something we call transhumant herding, in which herders drive their herds upland as soon as the snow is melted to get up there and then keep them up in these highlands to feed on this verdant grass for maybe 4 months, as long as possible before the snow covers it again. And that's when they really kind of get their maximum intake, and this is where the herds will be gleaned and developed and then taken down to the lowlands to be slaughtered for their wool and byproducts, or to be sold and what have you. And so in a way, this is a major component of the ancient Macedonian economy and activity. And you're dealing with elements here, especially young men, who are going to drive these herds, because you have to drive them or they'll just eat everything to the stubble. So you have to keep them moving. And so these are men that live outdoors, are used to this kind of outdoor environment. They're kind of hardy, they're tough, they're not afraid of the elements, and they know the limits of survival. And that makes them excellent warriors if you can kind of convince them to adapt to training for a military regime. And that is exactly what Philip was able to accomplish when he built the Macedonian Empire in the mid 4th century BC.